Right, welcome back. We apologize for that. You are listening to the Maryam Mkwanda show on Salam Media, and I'm your host, Maryam Mkwanda. Uh, June is a Men's Health Awareness Month, and our focus this month is on infertility amongst men. Dr. Salim Choonara, who is a urologist, is joining me on the line to talk more about this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Dr. Salim.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Maryam. Thank you for having me.
Shukran for joining me once again. So, Doctor, why is it so important for men to be aware of their health and to take care of it?
Yeah, it's actually very good that we have platforms like this and a month awareness where it creates us a bit more extra interest in these topics. For one, I think the big dreaded word of the cancers is always a big feature when it comes to men's health, because if you think about it, there's two organs that are so central to cancer that affect the men. One is the testicle, it's a testicular cancer, and also the prostate, so your prostate cancers. These are relatively common, and the great thing about these two conditions is that it can be very, very well treated, if detected early. So, we're always promoting this kind of awareness and can give information about this condition so that men are aware of this. Men know how to, understand it, how to sort of pick up some early signs, because then the treatment is actually very, very good. Remember, it's a big taboo with men. It's a very sensitive area
Yes.
involving the testicles, involving the prostate, and there's this tendency to allow things to linger on for a longer period of time, thinking that it will get better with time and it will go away. That's always the complacency that sets in to some extent. So I think the
Mm-hmm.
awareness that, look, these are the things to look out for, and also the understanding that there's very, very good treatment available should you suffer from one of these conditions, should give them some sort of hope and confidence and understanding. Look, let me not just hide this away, let me talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Now, infertility is something that has probably never crossed the minds of many men, as it is like you mentioned about the taboo of prostate and testicular cancer. Infertility is also something that is considered taboo and can only be a woman's problem, but that is not the case. So, how can we educate men and make them more aware of the issues of infertility as well?
100%. You're right. It's almost like, I don't want to say macho, but it's that kind of concept that comes into play. You feel like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how can something be wrong with me? It must be you that's the problem. And that kind of feature in relationships. One thing I always do whenever I'm faced with infertility, I always want to see the couple together. I don't want to see one or the other, because it's so central to both of them. You're right. I mean, there is a tendency to believe that it's more likely to be the female problem, but we know it's not the case. In fact, they say it's probably about 30 or 30% that either one can contribute, and maybe 30% which we just don't know or this we are uncertain about. Um, yeah, again, it's information, and I think maybe it comes from a culture type of situation as well, and these are not easy challenges to overcome. Hence, the interview that you conduct with a patient and their spouse is very, very critical. From the offset, you make sure they understand what this is about, and also you give them a relative realistic expectation. Remember, we know that even infertility, or in cases where there's an issue with fertility, we can't guarantee that 100% that medically we'll be able to sort this problem out. We always can't make that kind of call. So from the offset, you sort of make sure they understand you and give them a good realistic expectation, and then we work from there. To break the taboo, I think it's going to take time. I think it's information, it's educating people out there, um, and yeah, and those are challenges. Like I said, platforms like this goes a long way to educating people, and that's what it is. It's education about a condition, how to understand it, what are the causes behind it, what can be the problems, and yeah, that's going to take time. It's not an easy thing to overcome. I'll be honest to you.
Mhm. Right. Let's delve into the causes of male infertility. What are the causes there, and what should men look out for or be aware of?
Okay, so obviously, again, when there's a situation where to make a child, it involves the male and the female. So obviously you
Mm,
need the male component, which is the sperm, and the female component, obviously, which is the egg, and that needs to be fertilized through the act of sexual intercourse, and that's how you get fertilization. Now, anywhere along those pathways, problems can result. In this case, we're talking about the male, so I'm not going to speak much about the female. So from the male, it starts from the offset. So we're looking at, even before you get to the act of intercourse, we need to consider their well-being themselves. Have they suffered any conditions, and the one common thing that comes to mind are things like mums, even as a child, which can have an impact on the function of the testicle. So from the offset, we need to first assess this individual to see, okay, what is his hormonal status like? What are the testicles like? Are the testicles functioning? Are the hormones that are produced by the testicles, such as testosterone, are they in normal levels in the bloodstream? Is there the correct communication between the brain and the testicles, so that the signal to produce the sperm and the testicles are intact and are working functional? So first, we've got to look at that function aspect. Then we consider all the anatomical aspects. In other words, is there any injury to the penis itself? Is there damage to the urethra or the tube that carries the sperm out? Are the testicles, have they been injured? Have they been damaged? Has there been radiation involved? And we go through a whole series of possibilities. So in other words, so to summarize it, is to look at the function of the individual first, then all the anatomical aspects. Is there any problem that prevents this individual from delivering the sperm during the act of intercourse? So, those are the summaries. And then we go to the third aspect, which is now looking at the actual sperm itself. What is the characteristics of that sperm? What is it about that sperm that is preventing fertilization to take place? And there's many there, and the things like the count, the amount of sperm in the ejaculate. We're looking at the shape, which is very, very important, almost like a lock key mechanism, So even if there may be sperm in there during act of intercourse, and they are swimming around the egg, but if there's a problem with the shape of that sperm, it will not be able to connect to the ova, to the female egg, and then fertilization will not take place. Things like the motility, the ability to swim, the ability to move, to get to where it needs to get to. The shape of it, as I mentioned to you, the count. And there's a whole lot of characteristics that we also have to look at. So, it's on multiple levels that we're assessing this individual. And each of those levels, there are particular conditions that may or may not predispose the individual to that problem. Like I mentioned about things like mums, like radiation, hormonal issues. Is the problem with the brain signal? Because remember, the testicle is one organ, and testicles are actually very unique. Let me just make that point while we're talking about it. It's a very unique organ in the sense that it has two functions. It produces testosterone, and the same organ has another component or other cells in the testicle that produces the sperm. So from one organ, we're getting both those substances being produced, and the testicle is under direct control from the brain. So the hormones from the brain are telling the testicle produce the testosterone or produce the sperm, So it's an unbelievably complex mechanism, and attests again to the greatness of our Creator. It's just an unbelievable system that is put into place that ensures that all of that functions as it should be. And if there's a problem along that pathway, you start having issues. So it's a very, very complex, systematic investigation and approach that we're going to follow. To identify where the causes are. And commonly, what we also see, and again, like I said to you, we're looking at the physiology, the anatomy, we come down to the testicle itself. Commonly, what we see is a condition called a varicocele. And a varicocele basically is almost like, just for an understanding perspective, it's like these dilated veins around the testicle. And that puts a lot of pressure on the testicle, creates a bit of temperature changes around that area. And that may also interfere with the production of the sperm as well. This is what we understand it to be. There are aspects about fertility that we don't really understand. Like I said to you, we can't guarantee that even if we corrected all the abnormality, that individual will still be able to fall pregnant. We can't make that 100% guarantee, because there's some components that we don't actually understand fully.
Mm-hmm. Right. So how are fertility tests conducted, and what are you looking for when you do conduct the tests?
Okay. So the first thing, as I said, is a proper good history. We take a good history of the individual, understand their lifestyle, if they've been exposed to other things, etc. A good physical examination, looking at all the anatomical aspects, especially related to the penis, the testicle, and just general health status. And then we go on to the blood investigation, where we look at things like the hormonal profile. We look at the general blood functioning of that individual, what's the health status like, but particularly paying attention to the hormones from the brain and the production of the hormones from the testicle. And then we have to conduct what they call a spermiogram or a sperm analysis. So the individual has to give us a sample of an ejaculate, for which we then analyze. And that's where we look at all those characteristics, like I mentioned to you now, looking at the amount of sperm in that ejaculate, the shape, the structure, the ability for that sperm to swim and move around. And then we also then add to that an ultrasound or some imaging to the testicle itself, where we're now assessing the architecture and the function, and we're looking at the anatomy and the structure of the testicle. And also it's an opportunity for us to assess if there's any varicocele present as well, you know. So that's kind of the systematic approach that we use, you know. And once we made a diagnosis there, we will then decide now where the problem potentially lies and how can we try to manage that situation, you know.
All right. So, does or can genetics have or contribute to the low sperm count?
100%. There's no question about it. Very, very. But that's why the history taking is so important, because you want to know, is there a family history of this kind of thing? Are other siblings having a similar problem? Are there certain conditions or medical conditions that are prevalent in the family? And the genetics is a very, very important thing. I must say, we don't just simply expose an individual to major genetic tests as the first line of investigation, you know. Remember, we're going to go through, because it's not the commonest cause. It can happen, but it's not the commonest reason. Okay. So obviously we're going to run through the basic tests, as I mentioned to you now. And then from there on, whatever we find there, we're going to be directed into that avenue, into that arena where genetics may play a bigger role, you know. So it's not necessarily the first line of test, but we keep it in mind, especially if we're running a whole lot of series of investigation. We're not finding a cause for it. We must consider genetics as a role. And in fact, you know, there's the genetics does play a role as well, because there are certain conditions, certain genetic conditions where some of the anatomical structures are deficient. You know, in other words, the tubes that carry the sperm from the testicle into the penile area for delivery during intercourse, some of those tubes can even be deficient in certain genetic conditions. So yeah, so they do play a role to answer the question.
Well, and men, I'm sure there's lots of men who don't know this, and also because of that, they do not go for regular checkups. So, how important is regular checkups, and can they go to a GP, or do they need to go to a urologist like yourself?
The issue of infertility is a little bit more tricky, because remember, you know, if you look at especially in our communities, you know, where generally, I mean, people would engage in intercourse, you know, after marriage, etc. So you're going to find that some individuals, and we see some of our patients, we only see them later, maybe like at 25, 30. That's probably when they got married. Now they're like, hey, I can't have a child. Like, what's happening here? They're not necessarily going to be aware of this unless they've
Yeah.
tried or they've checked. You know what I'm saying? Because you know it's unusual for men just to say, okay, I'm going to do a routine sperm analysis. Like, why? You know, it's not necessary. It's not always going to feature as a test that you're going to do regularly. But I think, you know, maybe some signs or some sort of guide or indication that there could be some problems again would come down to the testicle itself, you know, and that would now feature with testicular self-examination. If the testicles are sort of very small, very atrophied, you know, there's a discrepancy in the size of the testicle, that could point towards some abnormality with production of both testosterone and sperm. If an individual is not developing as they should develop, you know, there's no proper hair growth, there's no development as a male should develop, you know, especially for a parent looking at a child in that situation. Like, maybe it should, something should go off in the mind and say, look, you know what, if I look at my other kids, there's something different about this child. Maybe I should have this thing checked out, you know. So that may be a reason how they would come for assessment, you know. And then, yeah, and then as I said, you know, if they feel like there's some abnormality, you know, they're experiencing some problem with the testicle, pain in the testicle, swelling of the testicle, or even a discrepancy in sizes, whether they're big or smaller, is something that should be checked out. As far as the GPs are concerned, I mean, obviously the GP is always the first point of entry for patients with medical conditions. But again, like I'm saying, you know, it's not going to necessarily be something that's going to feature on their mind on the top of the list. They're going to think of infections. They're going to think of lots of other things. They're not necessarily going to just delve into infertility. We're only going to be prompted about infertility if the individual is going to come and say, I'm trying to have a child and I can't. That may be the first time that we actually going to say, okay, maybe let's delve a bit more deeper into that. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily going to feature prior to that.
All right, so we're going to leave it there for now. Shukran so much for your time once again, Dr. Salim, and have a pleasant day. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It was Dr. Salim Choonara, urologist, and giving us some more information about men's health, especially with the not testicular cancer, but well, he did mention a few of those points, but infertility and infertility being one of the causes of not being able to have children. It is also a male problem just as much as it is a female problem. So let's not play blame games here. Let's rather go and get yourself checked and take your partner with you, especially if you are trying to have a child and you cannot. It is 11:32. You are listening to the Maryam Mkwanda Show on Salam Media, and we are also live on Facebook. To stay with us, I will be joined by Luyanda Aziza CBC, our fitness trainer. And today we are talking about the diastasis recti. Do stay tuned.